Hello everyone and welcome to this new episode of Learn Stress Free. I'm your host, Jeff Rodrigue. My goal with this podcast is to make scientific knowledge accessible to the public in a way that's fun and easy to understand for everyone, even your 5-year-old cousin. All thanks to my guests who are all experts conducting research in academia. In today's episode, we're going to talk about self-determination theory. Our guest will explain what self-determination theory is and why it's so important to understand it. Here's a little hint. It influences our well-being. Drawing on his expertise and extensive scientific research, our guest will debunk some common misconceptions about motivations and answer questions such as, what are the different types of motivation? How do our motivations and the underlying reasons for our actions influence our well-being? And thanks to science, you'll get the answer to the age-old question, does money really buy happiness? In this episode, you'll find answers to these questions and more. Without further ado, let's learn stress-free with Jacques Forest from the University of Quebec in Montreal. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn Stress-Free. Today's guest is Jacques Forest, but as is my habit, I won't introduce him because the best person to introduce himself is him. So I'll let Jacques, who are you? Why are you here? Why do you do what you do?
Super, that's a good question. So my name is Jacques Forest. I'm a full prof at École des sciences de la gestion de l'UQAM, so UQAM School of Management Science in Montreal, in Montreal. So I'm an organizational psychologist, so I'm a registered psychologist, and I'm also a certified human resource professional. And what interests me both in research and intervention are the antecedents and outcomes of the quality of human motivation. So my background is in sports psychology, but as I learned back then, and I try to explain today, it's that the model that explains optimal human functioning are exactly the same, be it in sport, in education, in work, in society in general. So basically, how can we stimulate optimal functioning, performance, and well-being? That's what interests me in life. So yeah.
So understanding the human mind. In sort, part of the human mind, because it's complex.
Yeah. A very small part, but with a very good theory, shall I say.
Okay. Speaking of that theory, actually, my first question is concerning that theory. So I would like to help our audience to understand what is self-determination, how does it relate to motivation, and why is it important to study and understand these concepts?
That's great. So self-determination theory, the first article that you can track was published in 1971. So there's 50 years or more of research on this. SDT is composed of 6 different mini theories. All the details are not important, but 2 essential parts of SDT are the quality of the self-determination motivation continuum and also the basic and innate universal psychological needs. So one part about motivation, engagement, passion, or mobilization, usually we'll say that we want higher levels of engagement in the workplace. We want students to be highly engaged at the school. But if you have someone at work who is highly engaged in speaking badly of his or her colleague, if you ask someone who is highly energized in taking out the air of your tires on your car, you don't want this type of energy to be increased. So motivation is not a question of quantity, but more importantly of quality. So we have done either a data collection or we have items to measure human motivations at work in 27 different languages, and the patterns of correlations are always the same. So basically, if you put the quality of human motivation on a continuum, you start with fun, then meaning, then internal pressure, external pressure, rewards, and then demotivation. So the scientific words for this continuum are intrinsic, identified, introjected, extrinsic, and amotivation. So intrinsic motivation are all the tasks that you are doing either at your job or while you are doing your hobby that are fun. When time flies by, you are in the here and now, you are experiencing the state of flow. That's intrinsic motivation, and it is possible to experience it both at work and outside of work. But fun in and of itself is a good predictor of well-being, but not necessarily performance. And this is where you need the second type of motivation, which is termed identified motivation. The tricky part with identified motivation, it is that it is an extrinsic motivation, which is highly internalized. One example in the workplace would be companies' values. Usually when you walk in a company, when I do intervention or diagnostics, you walk in a company and on the wall, you have the values which are important for that company. This is entirely extrinsic. But if we are showing to you these values in a positive fashion and you are willingly absorbing it, it is an extrinsic motivation, which is highly internalized, and it creates meaning with you, which leads to performance. Then you have internal pressure, which in scientific term is called introjected motivation. The problem with an introjected motivation, it is that you have a half part which is good and the other half which is more negative. The half part which is good is called introjected approach. When you want to prove to yourself that you are able to do something, you are putting internal pressure towards you to finish something. But it is inextricable from the negative part, which is introjected avoidance, where you want to avoid guilt or shame. So in meta-analysis, introjected motivation is linked to performance, but with a high psychological, emotional, and physical cost. And then you have extrinsic motivation, which can either be social approach, social avoidance, or material approach, material avoidance. And it is the willingness to please others or to avoid criticism from others. And you want more rewards, or you want to avoid losing those rewards or receive punishments. And then you have the absence of motivation. The fun thing is that any type of job, any spheres of life where fun and meaning are highly present, you only harvest positive consequences and you push away negative consequences. The portrait completely changes when you move towards controlled motivation. And this is especially so if you don't have autonomous motivation. It will lead to more burnout, cheating, lying, moral disengagement, antisocial behavior. So one very interesting part of SDT is that motivation does not necessarily vary in quantity. Quality is more important. And then you have the innate and universal psychological needs, which can increase these types of motivation. That's the second part, which I thoroughly enjoy with self-determination theory.
Okay, so, and because you mentioned physical, psychological well-being, so there is a link, because you mentioned there's quantity of motivation. Like sometimes we feel we're really motivated and sometimes we're less, but it's, so you say quality, meaning like the reason why you do things or what really motivates you. And I insist on the really motivates you, right? Because sometimes we think that we do things for one thing, but it's really for another thing, right?
Yeah.
So I help my friend move because, well, I'm moving next year and I want help. It's not the same as I'm helping my friend move because, well, I want to help my friend move, I guess.
Exactly.
So quality is important. And the link to well-being, because you mentioned it, no matter the aspects of your life, it still matters, still important. So, and it has a link with well-being. So I think that's important to understand that motivation and well-being are linked.
Yeah. When you look at the different consequences, for example, physical consequences, there are research linking, for example, the stress hormone levels that you have in the saliva. We recently published a paper linking the self-determination theory concepts with cardiac electrophysiology. How is your heart relating to stress? So it's the interplay between the sympathetic and parasympathetic system within your brain. So that's the physiological concerns. There are some behavioral consequences of the quality of your motivation. Research will show that if you have high extrinsic motivation, you might increase the consumption of different substances, be it caffeine, nicotine, or alcohol. It will also have an impact on the quality of your sleep. So the quality of your why can make you happy or sad. And research tend to show that we would need to target happiness to harvest performance and not the other way around. Usually in workplaces, we tend to increase performance and we care or not about well-being, but research tends to show that happiness or well-being, eudaimonic well-being, shall be the target of any social system. That would then lead to performance. So with your question, is it linked to health? Totally, be it physically, emotionally, psychologically, or behaviorally. And if we push it a notch further, we did some econometric analyses showing that if you invest in increasing the quality of human motivation, you will have a high return on investment. So there's a whole array of consequences that are desirable both individually and organizationally and societally that can be promoted through high quality motivation.
That's why I love science. See, if there's any business leaders listening, invest in your people. That's the best thing you can do. So, but it's interesting because you mentioned well-being and the quality and the why we do things, and that those theories apply to any aspects of our lives. So how can on our regular lives, like on our day-to-day lives, can we take better care of ourselves? Because I know like people are struggling, right? Like life goes by fast, people are tired. And so how can this theory help people in our audience to inspire themselves based on that knowledge and what the science has proven, so that they can take better care of themselves?
That's a good question. So basically, the different types, the continuum of self-determination theory is always true. If you measure it in sport, in parental practices, in epidemiology or social medicine, it is always true. The more you aim towards and the more you are able to experience fun, integrity, and identity and meaning, the more positive consequences you will harvest. And the more you work towards or you walk towards the control motivation, it is not necessarily entirely bad, but there's a mix of both positive and negative consequences, and the negative becomes more present the more you go towards extrinsic motivation or demotivation. So the other part of SDT that I like, and we mentioned it in our book, the ABC of work motivation, ABC stands for the three basic psychological needs: autonomy, belongingness, and competence. So usually people know the Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, which I strongly encourage everyone listening to us to forget it. Because it was
I studied it so hard.
It was a nice approximation 80 years ago. There's a full of good things in this, and it's the evolution of this pyramid that we analyzed, that we as a research trend, shall I say. And SDT has shown in more than 100 countries that there are more than three needs, but these three needs are always the most important to predict optimal functioning, performance, and well-being. So autonomy is the trickiest to define, because when we see autonomy, people think about liberty, freedom, or independence. It is not the case. We are never independent. We are always interdependent. So autonomy is the capacity to make choices within specific rules and regulation. And it is also the capacity to act authentically, to be your true self. So autonomy is both the perception of choice and congruence or concordance. The second basic psychological need, belongingness, it is the capacity to feel that you can take care of others and vice versa. So you have mutually favorable interpersonal relationships. And finally, competence. No one wakes up in the morning telling themselves, I'm looking forward to experience failure today. We are geared toward success. So these three needs, an image you can have, are the three legs of a stool. To maintain its balance, a stool needs a minimum of three legs. It can have 15 or 7 legs, but 3 legs are the minimum requirement to have a balance. So those three basic psychological needs are universal, and they're important to everywhere, everyone, all the time. So this means that if your psychological needs are satisfied at work but not at home, you might become obsessively passionate about your work because this is your only source of brain vitamins. In the other way around, if your 3 psychological needs are satisfied at home but not at work, you might drag your legs to get to work to collect your paycheck. If your 3 needs are unsatisfied in the different spheres of life, it's time to ask for help or change things. But a happy life can be experienced when your 3 psychological needs are satisfied both at work and outside of work. So that's what's fun with research. If you test it in 100 countries or more, and it always works in the same way, Why not do it with everyone, everywhere, all the time?
Because we're all human. So basically, so for I understand that self-determination theory and the ABC, which is autonomy, belongingness, and competency, is if you're a human, it comes as a package deal, right? You're a
Exactly.
human. Hey, there you go. It comes with the rest.
It's wired in our brain. Yeah, you're totally right. And there are no superhuman or subhuman. We are all humans. The tricky part, another tricky part, is that these basic psychological needs are universal, but they are not uniform. Everyone has a different way of satisfying these needs, but these needs are universal. So there might be some cultural differences in the way of we satisfy needs. There might be different ways to satisfy your psychological needs if you work with your hands or if you work with your head. But the underlying motivational principle is always true. You need to know what choices can I do, what are the limits, how can I be efficient, and how can I connect with others.
And you talk about connecting, and it's interesting because also with well-being, and from what I understood, so I want to validate, make sure I understood properly. Because, for example, if I have dinner Saturday night with friends,
Yeah.
and it can feed my belonging.
Yeah.
But now when we talk about autonomy, if I go because I want to, because I miss my friends, it's going to be a fun night, can't wait to see them, versus if I feel that I have to because I told them yes, and then I'll disappoint them, but I'm tired, I want to stay home. So basically, so the same event can not feed the sort of brain vitamin. I like that.
Yeah.
So going out and having dinner with your friends, even though it's the same activity, the process behind it can affect how beneficial it is for you. That same event.
You're entirely right. So the what and why of goals are important, and that's exactly one of the titles of one of the most cited SDT article. It's the what and why of goal. The what is not important in as much as the why, but the what has some
importance. Still matters.
It matters, but the why is way more important. For example, if we take your example of the supper, if we take the three needs and the different types of motivation. So if you only go to that dinner to please your life partner, that would be social avoidance. You want to avoid your spouse to criticize you. You might do it because I want to get there and show them the super expensive bottle of wine I bought. So that's introjected and social approach. I want to show that I'm a good host or that I am a good invitee. It could be motivated by identified motivation. I love my friends. I value friendship and family. I will put effort in it even though I'm tired. And intrinsic motivation would be, I love parties. It's always fantastic, and we share good food, good wine. We're having a good time. And then if we go back to the three basic psychological needs and the three legs of the stool, you might feel efficient in going. Some friends, you like them more than others, so belongingness might not be entirely satisfied. And then autonomy, if we are imposing on you to get there, then you lose your balance. But if we are giving you a structure and choices within specific rules and regulations and say, okay, yeah, I choose to go, autonomy, the leg would be solid. So the what and why of why you do things is super important for your health, for your happiness, for your performance, both for yourself and also for people around you.
As a farmer and still sometimes people pleaser, and probably people listening to us, some of you identify as people pleasers. So basically, we can actually not hurt ourselves, but we're not helping our well-being if we do things for the wrong reasons, even if they're good things.
It might be momentarily good to sustain the behavior with extrinsic reasons, but in the longer term, this behavior might bring more bad than good. So it is possible to act to increase the autonomous reasons and sometimes restrict the controlled reasons in why we do things. So that's what's interesting, both with research, but also with intervention. There are fascinating research, for example, teaching teachers how to be need supportive and to see its impact on their students. There is intervention showing coaches how to act with athletes. And there are research telling manager and teaching manager how to be more need supportive and the effect it has both on themselves and their employees. And when we are aiming towards the three basic psychological needs of autonomy, competence, and belongingness, we always win. So that's what's fascinating with this theory, is that you are harvesting what's best in humans because it tackles the profound nature of human nature when we identify the three basic psychological needs.
I feel that's an editorial comment from myself. It only involves me, no other one. But I feel that society is structured in a way that's kind of dragging us away from those human interaction and those human needs. And even because you mentioned belonging is a universal need. So we all need to feel like we belong.
Yeah.
And I feel, so when I hear this, because I'm working really hard, I'm not perfect, but I'm working really hard to make my content as accessible and inclusive as possible.
Yes.
And inclusion is a way to make sure that everybody feels that they belong, in the sense, if I understood, because there's a big, sadly, pushback against inclusion. It's misunderstood a lot also what it really is. But inclusion is basically making sure that everyone has their basic universal needs met. Or am I?
You're entirely right. So there are no superhuman or subhuman persons. Everyone is human and everyone has these three basic psychological needs. Again, there are more than three basic psychological needs, but these three are the most important. They are universal, but they are not uniform. Everyone has a different way to satisfy these needs. For example, with neurodivergent populations, people who have high intellectual potential, or let's say people on the autism spectrum, or
ADHD. Also.
ADHD or Asperger's syndrome, they still have this basic psychological need of belongingness, but the way they are satisfying these needs are different. So, for example, people who are on the autism spectrum disorder, who has Asperger, they have very limited interests and they are highly involved in these interests. So their way of belonging with others might be only people who share these interests. It doesn't mean that they don't have the need for belongingness. The idea behind this is that they have this need, but the way they are satisfying it is different. The same goes with the different life stages or generations. I am sick and tired of consultants saying that there are differences in generations. There are no differences in the underlying motivational mechanisms that explains performance and well-being. There is anecdotal differences showing that if you are in the early life, the way to satisfy autonomy, belongingness, and competence might be different than if you are 5 years from retirement. But the underlying principle is always true. You always have autonomy, belongingness, and competence. But the career stage or the life stage you're at might make us see that there are some differences. But if you scratch the surface and go underneath, it's always the ABC that counts.
I love what you're saying, because so what I understand is the self-determination theory and autonomy, the need for autonomy, belonging, and competency is universal, is across the board, is for everyone. And I like when you say when you scratch the surface, because I like sometimes to go and see, the dark side of things, like the other side of the coin. And there's an article that really stuck with me that I read many years ago, because the generational wars has been since forever. I mean, go read newspaper from the early 1900s, and they were complaining that children were, unappreciative and lazy, and it's been like that since the dawn of time. But because the generation war is kind of still active, right? And I read in the article is, okay, but are the boomers today, people who are boomers today, so like in their 60s or 70s, are they really different than the Gen Z when the boomers were that age? So basically, it's more about the life stage and where you're at and building your life and setting up. The thing is, it moved, right? Because, I mean, I'm a millennial, and there's no way my generation could buy a house and feed a family without finishing high school, right? Because that's not possible. You need to go do a master's degree or whatever. So you start your life later, but where you're So I like that the article said we're more so the same, right? So the differences in generation are more like where you're at in your life now. If you're
Exactly.
planning retirement versus if you're planning to start a family, but the person planning retirement might have been the person planning for a family some
Yeah,
30, 40 years
exactly.
ago. And probably they weren't that different back then, would they? Because humans are humans.
Exactly.
Our needs are the
And
same.
that's why we start the book, The ABC of Work Motivation, with a chapter on the beliefs you have towards human beings. Human beings are naturally inclined towards kindness, pro-social motivation, beneficence, benevolence. It is the system that we put under over the humans that creates these negative tendencies. But fundamentally and deeply wired in our brain are positive motivation. We only need to push away what suppresses these pro-social motivations, which are naturally present in all human beings in different proportions. So that's the important part. So that's why we start the book with these fundamental beliefs about humans, and be it generations, ethnic origins, the degree of studies, or if you are unionized or not, these are just beliefs. When you test them scientifically, you suddenly realize that all human beings are worthy and that we shall encourage each and every one of them.
I'll show the book again on screen for people to see. The link is going to be in the show description. But I like one of the things I like in the book is you have to ask yourself questions. Containing to work, but so our relationship to work also and what we're doing and why we're doing it. It helps leaders also give them the tools for people's leader to build on the basically the foundation of humans to help them grow and foster their well-being and help the organization. And you mentioned something interesting because you said the systems in which we put the people. And I don't want to start a big debate on capitalism because the podcast is never going to end. But I feel like that system feeds on competition. It feeds on individualism. I feel that I take my anecdote and I'll ask someone who knows the science. But I feel like the system kind of counterintuitive to what we need and who we are as human.
Yeah, that's a good question. And we oftentimes compare communism with capitalism, and both are wrong for different reasons. Communism would be everyone is exactly the same, but that's unfair because some people are more deserving than others. Some people, and I can really identify a few colleagues or people in society, which I think they're really worthy. They have more impact than I do. So it would be unfair that we all get the exact same consequences.
Well, just to clarify, I mean, this, for example, people were doing cancer research, like their impact is for the whole population. Like if they crack the code, the whole world is going to benefit from it.
Exactly. So it would be unfair for those people who crack the code of cancer to not be rewarded for it. So that communism, that's why it's bad. Capitalism is also bad because it states that if you are better than others, you can crush them and harvest all the rewards for yourself. The reality is that there needs to be differences, but constrained differences. So there are two different notions underneath this. The first one is financial satiation. In French, it would be la satiété financière. So it's like food. When we eat, so for example, when you go, if we were having lunch together, you might have a big meal and I might have a small meal. In as much as at the end, we are not hungry anymore. That's satiation. So research shows that between 60 to 105,000 US dollar, at least for North America, this is where money has the most impact on happiness.
Adjusted to inflation. Adjusted for inflation.
Let's aim for 150. But as you go higher than this, happiness goes down. So that's the first element. Financial satiation exists, and too little or too much money creates perturbation. The other element, which is important, is there's a fascinating research which has been done by Kiat Pongzan and Norton. Michael Norton, he's at Harvard Business School. They surveyed over 40,000 people in 40 different countries, asking them, if you take the lowest paid in an organization or a social system, how much should the highest paid be paid? And people are able to tolerate 5 times the difference.
Oh, but they haven't been that in 100 years.
So 5 times people can say, okay, that person is 5 times more deserving than me. For example, an astronaut, a neurosurgeon, a very efficient airplane pilot. If they are really good at something, it's okay for them to be paid more or to receive more rewards or prestige, but within a constrained limit. The problem appears when we go higher than these differences. And in some societies, for example, Canada, US, or some other places, it went through the roof. There's some research showing that the economic inequalities that we are experiencing right now are as worse as it was with the French Revolution. So basically, money is super efficient to extract yourself from poverty. Once you reach a certain level, it has the most effect on happiness. But if you go higher than this, troubles appears. That's within individual. Between individual, people are super happy to have differences in rewards. People will encourage differences in rewards when people are more deserving, but it needs to be constrained. So both communism and capitalism are wrong in their most extreme forms. So the in-between is where happiness for everyone lies.
So from that, what I cannot gather is basically once we were set, more money doesn't make a difference.
Exactly. You're entirely
then
right.
it becomes an ego contest almost at that point.
Yeah. Not to say something even worse, but
we'll keep it. I can edit it out after all. but so yeah, because I say like I say sometimes, like 99% of people are stressed or have mental health issues. The top 1% have different mental health issues. Probably. But so because it's pretty, I saw a Oxfam report recently, and in the last 10 years, so since 2015, the top 1%'s wealth increased. Not total wealth, just wealth increased 33.9 trillions, which could end world poverty 22 times, and they would still be too rich. And so when we see this, and I guess, and also because it affects well-being, right? Because you mentioned the physical well-being. So not having those needs met, I guess, is also physically and mentally taxing.
It is. So
no
if
plans,
you are if you are experiencing financial strain, it has a toll psychologically, emotionally, physiologically, and also behaviorally. If you need to put more hours within the week because you're paid by the hours, it takes away time which could be invested elsewhere. I also like the research done by Ashley Willens. She's a Canadian working at Harvard Business School, and she has showed with huge samples, like I think 200,000 people or more in different countries, showing that if you are working less, you are more efficient. I'm simplifying, but basically, if you have more quality time at work, and then you are allowed to have quality time in your personal life, everyone wins. Your employer, the society in which you're in, and also you personally, and with your spouse, partner, kids, and people who are close to yourself. So time is the only true differentiator. So if you are a billionaire or you are poor, there might be some effect on your life expectancy, but it's not 100 years difference. It might be 6 or 10 years difference. So time is the ultimate limitator of human existence, and the quality of the why and the quality of the time you have both at work and outside of work is a great predictor of happiness.
I read an article in Harvard Business Review, which I love reading Harvard Business Review, and it said basically people are very happy and have a lot of money, or not necessarily happy because they have a lot of money. The real thing that explains their happiness is because they take that extra disposable income to not do things they don't want to do. Like
Exactly.
they're gonna they're gonna pay someone to clean the house. They're gonna clean someone maybe to cook the dishes. They're gonna cook. So basically, it's just they just have more time to spend on things that they like, but it's not the money itself. It's just the what you do with your time that changes.
Exactly. So spending money on others has more effect than spending it on yourself. Using money to take away time increases your happiness. Investing in security, in future orientation, taking away concerns that might appear also is efficient. And buying experiences rather than material things have more effect. So money can be used to satisfy your basic psychological needs, and this is where money could be handy.
From what I understand, then when they say because there is a cost, financial cost of being poor, but I'm understanding there's a well-being cost of being poor and not having enough money because first you can't fulfill your basic needs, you don't have much free time. And you mentioned it as like your brain vitamin. I love that expression so much.
Yeah.
So you have brain vitamin. So basically, so not having those needs met is actually impacting people way more than just on the financial outcome.
Yeah, and I'm really interested on research on unconditional universal basic income (UUBI). Unconditional universal basic income is exactly what it says. Unconditionally, because you are human, we will give you money to push away life's irritants. And the first known experiment on unconditional universal basic income has been done in Canada, in Manitoba, in the 70s. And basically, what the research results show that if we give people money, the natural reflex would be if we pay people to do nothing, they'll stay at home, do and party all day, and they won't do anything worthy for the human endeavors. But it's exactly the opposite. Since our brain are wired toward initiative, efficiency, and connectedness, the research shows that people who were given money were able to study longer. They were able to create their own companies. They were consuming less social services because they had less physical complaints, psychological complaints, behavioral complaints. And since they were sure to get money, they were able to have a future time orientation and plan in advance. So basically, when we are giving people money, people are happier and everyone wins. There are some experiments who are being done right now in Ireland with artists. There has been some experiment in Finland, in Namibia, in Botswana, in Africa. So basically, research shows that if we are harvesting what's best in human, we are harvesting positive consequences. So unconditional universal basic income, what it states is there will be differences. There will always be people who are richer than others. So we only need to slightly compress these differences so that everyone wins. And the interesting part is that both poor and rich people are happier in more compressed societies. So it is not only for poor people, whatever poor that means. Everyone wins when societies are more compressed. We need to have differences, but these differences need to be constrained so that everyone wins.
So to get out people of survival mode, because you say, I hear that a lot, that if we pay people to do nothing, they will do nothing. But I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel it's against human nature. And I feel that the reason that is that because so many people don't have the luxury or privilege to love what they do, like they don't live from their passion. And I have a feeling that people have a hard time imagining a world in which you don't have to be in the hamster wheel 24/7 to feed yourself and your family. Yeah. But I'm pretty sure. So I think that comes out of a place of exhaustion of people. Like, if you give me money, like, I'm just going to sit on my sofa, stare at the wall for the next 6 months. But after those 6 months, when your batteries are recharged, I don't think you're going to want to sit on that sofa anymore.
Exactly. You're entirely right. And there are some fascinating research which have been done with lottery winners. people who are actually experiencing that dream life that the marketing tells you. And what usually happens is that people have a high surge in happiness. They travel, they take some vacation, and they take some time off because they're tired and stuff. But after a few months, if not a year, you come at the exact same level of happiness that you were, but in more comfortable circumstances. So rather than have a normal sofa, you will have a leather sofa. Rather than having a 10-year-old car, you have a new car, but you're still as happy or unhappy that you were before. So basically, money is the most efficient mean to push away concerns and irritants. Once you get to a somewhat like an altitude of let's say if you take a plane flight, you have an altitude where it's optimal for winds and efficiency and stuff. If you are higher or lower, it's less efficient. But then if you have too much money, it creates concerns of its own, which are completely different than when you don't have enough money. But their general underlying idea is that we need air, water, food for the physiological needs. For the psychological needs, you have autonomy, belongingness, and competence. And more money will not bring more happiness on more performance.
Because it won't bring more autonomy, belonging, or competence.
Exactly. So if we rely on science to know what human beings desperately need, not preferences, we see that money is one of the least efficient ways we have to increase optimal functioning up to a certain point.
Because I feel sometimes a metaphor like money is like a paywall almost to happiness for some people. And I feel, because I heard once that the lottery is like alcohol. It doesn't change you. It just reveals who you are.
Yeah.
So I feel that having more money will just, because you said the thing at the beginning about the quality, or, you know, like we all have our needs of autonomy, our needs of belonging, and our needs of competence. But the way we're going to get those will change. And I feel that having too much money might get you more ways to get to those, but you'll still be striving to achieve those.
And one of the best ways to use money to be happy is to spend it on others. And what is the best way to spend it on others? Income tax. We are doing some research on income tax motivation. And we might slowly transit towards a wealth taxation, but that's for the future research. But income tax, you have the exact same continuum. People can integrate within the identity the importance of spending money for others. With identified motivation, a lot of people will have very high levels of contributing to society, be it schools, hospitals, roads. People are happy to contribute. It's part of themselves. People will then resort to shame, guilt, or pride to pay income tax. Or some people might pay income tax because they are afraid that if they are not doing it, the government will slap them on the head. But the fun part is to see that people who are voluntary compliant are happier than people who are compliantly enforced. So society and organizations will win if we are able to freely help the integration or the internalization of that charity, fairness, and justice framework. And people who are willingly inclined in contributing to others will create more happiness both for themselves and for others. So that's what's fun with research, is that we confront our stereotypes or the general ideas we have, and then we test it with a few hundred or thousand people. And the systematic way of increasing happiness and well-being for the larger part is what interests me and what interests us as a research theory.
Because you mentioned, so basically, so paying taxes makes people happier, but I feel it goes to the dinner with friends. So why do you do it, right? Because if you pay a lot of taxes, it means technically you did a lot of money, technically, right? If you do that.
And it might, go ahead.
And I feel it depends on how you perceive it, for sure, depending on where you live and how you pay taxes and how they're used, like might not be the most optimal way that taxes could be used. But at the same time, like I read on the internet recently, like someone says, I don't have kids. I don't know why I pay school taxes. And someone answered, I don't have kids, but I want kids to be educated because that's what's best for society. So I feel like it goes back to the reason why you do it, right? Because if you pay taxes, yeah, it's basically a pool of money that we put for helping others.
Exactly.
And I feel if you see it like that, it's like I'm contributing to society. But I feel if you see it more like I do it because I have to do it because otherwise I'll end up in jail, then your happiness for the same action won't be the same.
And Ashley Willens, again, did a fascinating research. It's called the Giving Pledge. These are billionaires pledging that when they die, half of their fortune will be given away.
Why are they waiting?
She content analyzed the letters of people willingly putting their fortune to the betterment of society, and people who have refused, even though they're billionaires, to pledge these fortune to the betterment of society. And basically, the quality of the why can make them happy or sad. The only difference is if you and we give half of our fortune when we die, it won't make that much of a difference because we don't have a few billion. At least I don't have any billions.
I don't know about close.
But then these people who are hoarding money can have tremendous either positive effect when they are giving it away or tremendous negative effect because they are negating these capabilities to humanity. So basically, the Oxfam report this year, they've told us that the 8 most richest person on Earth, who are all men, have as much wealth as the poorest half of humanity. So as a species, we have never been that rich. The only problem is that it is unfairly distributed and everyone would win in spreading the joy. So so income tax motivation is fascinating to explore.
I'm idealistic, and I was talking to a friend recently. I'm like, I'm pretty sure the cure to cancer is in the head of a kid who had to quit school because he had to help his parents paying the rent.
You're entirely right.
We're as a society, we're probably keeping ourselves away from a cure for cancer because a kid had to leave school to help their parents pay for rent. Like we'll never know. We'll never know.
Yeah.
But
you could
there's
apply
definitely wasted potential there.
You could apply it to climate urgency. You could apply it for space exploration or whatnot. But you're entirely right. Research will show, and people have a hard time understanding it. You need to have fairness of opportunities, not fairness of outcomes. Societies or organizations which succeeds take a whole array of person and give them all the chances to be at their best. But then it is not true that everyone will get to the exact same point at the end. But at the beginning, that's where it is important to give. So programs, for example, in Quebec, we have the child health, les centres de la petite enfance, the childhood center.
Childcare.
Childcare. So and school, free school, and limited
wealth gap
fees for universities, for example.
Yeah.
So everyone more or less has a chance in having a head start, but it is not true that everyone will get at the exact same place. This is where both communism and capitalism are wrong. The truth is somewhat in between and slightly closer to social democracy than pure capitalistic systems.
I feel from what I hear is I often says that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is done wrong because people don't understand what it is, and it's the systems that needs to change. And as you say, if we DEI, the goal is to offer everyone the same opportunities.
Yeah,
and then the outcome, people are different, have different strengths, different challenges, different desires, potential. Like things are changed. Not everybody wants to be CEO, but the purpose is give everyone a chance, give everyone the same chances, and then let them. But the thing is, the system doesn't allow for people to have the same chances.
Exactly,
and that's what I think as a society we hurt ourselves also. Because there are majestic things that could be accomplished that we'll probably never know because those people will never be on the radar because they don't have those opportunities.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about misconception, because one of the things I want with my podcast is, yes, for sure, the science, but also address misinformation and misconceptions. So you mentioned, that unlimited money is almost associated with unlimited happiness. That's wrong. Science backs it. That's wrong. Other misconceptions about your field of research, there's self-determination theory or the 3 universal basic needs that you're like, we hear a lot of things that people think, but that's not what science says.
Yeah, there's quite a few that pops to mind. One of the first would be that intrinsic motivation is impossible at work. It's not the case. Usually people who are saying this are the ones who are pursuing a career only for money. So they can't imagine or experience that you can have fun at work. So that would be one. The other main thing which people don't get with SDT is that money is not always extrinsic. Money can be intrinsic, identified, introjected, and extrinsic. But generally speaking, money, the reasons that revolves around money are more external pressure. I need to put food on the table. I need to put a roof over my head. But we've done fascinating research asking people, not only do you want to make money, but why do you want to make money? And when people are making money for liberty, freedom, charity, equity, fairness, it can lead to happiness because it satisfies the basic psychological needs. But if you want to make money for impulsivity, I want to buy everything I want. Social comparison, I want to make more money than the other. And overcoming your self-doubt with money, no amount of money will please you.
And that explains a few things.
And research shows that these reasons are true no matter the amount of money you have. So basically, why you want to make money can be made for autonomous reasons and for controlled reasons. So if I work in a business school and some students will say, I want to be rich. And I ask them, why do you want to be rich? And some will answer, I want to be rich because I want to go back in the region where I'm from and I want to help everyone. I want to build an ice rink. I want to renovate all the buildings because I'm proud of my region. Go ahead, be a billionaire because you'll spend it on others. Others will say, before I'm 30, I want to live in Westmount, the most expensive place in Montreal, and I want to have 3 luxury cars in my driveway. To what avail? What will make you happy with that? You only spending it on yourself. That's greed. So the exact same amount, when it is done for a different why, can lead people to be happy or sad and to make everyone else happy or sad. So that's another tough nut to crack with SDT. And another one that pops to mind or stereotypes that people have is that, oh, there's more than 3 needs. Or, no, everyone has different needs. No, research is quite clear. There are more than 3 needs, but these 3 are systematically the most important. And while they are universal, everyone has a different way of satisfying it.
But so the end goal is that. The end goal is that need.
Yeah, that's the difference in research in what we call idiosyncratic or nomothetic. So everyone has these 3 needs, but everyone has a different way of satisfying these needs. So that's the fun part with research and intervention, because when I get to places or organizations to do diagnostic and intervention, we know that these people have these 3 needs, but the way of satisfying them are completely different. And I'll give you a funny example. I once did an intervention in a warehouse, like more of a production company. And to satisfy competence, the element which made a complete difference was the size of the gloves that people were using. Just giving the choice, autonomy, in a warm relationship, belongingness, to choose the best type of glove and the size of glove to do your job, competence, was a huge difference. And also there were tools for right-handed people, and they bought tools in a lower percentage for left-handed people. This makes a huge difference because they gave the choice, autonomy, to give a tool to increase their competence. And since they were considering that they were left-handed, it made a huge difference. So it's not that complicated, but once you put your glasses with the three innate and universal psychological need, it creates tremendous differences in intervention.
So I feel sometimes we like to make things complicated, and they shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. Yeah.
Like people, I often says people in organizations, you cannot understand organizations if you do not understand humans, because organizations are a bunch of humans stuck together, and the organization has been designed by human, right? The policies, the procedures, the structure, everything has been designed by humans, but humans is at the foundation of it all, and no matter the role that we play, parent, friend, spouse, employee, leader, underneath that hat, the human is there.
You're entirely right. Yeah.
So I'm just making sure I covered everything. This we covered also. Perfect. So we spoke about science, drawing inspiration from a scientific paper. At the end of a scientific paper, we talk about what's next, what's the future of, what should be studied, what. So my question for you, what's next in your field of research? And also what's next, what can we expect from you, Jacques, for your future papers or books that you're working on? Or
that's really good. Good question. So people who are interested in self-determination theory, there's a website of the theory. It's selfdeterminationtheory.org. So since the theory has been around since 50 years, it has been applied in various domains. The fun part is that we know that the underlying principles are true. The next step is to try to apply it. For example, there are super interesting research showing that we can teach coaches, parents, and managers to be more need supportive, and this then has a trickle-down effect on students, employees, and athletes. And giving need supportive behaviors has both a positive effect for the recipient of your behaviors, but also for yourself. So applying these underlying motivational principles are a future that then thrill me. That's quite optimistic to see this. So that's for the SDT theory. As a field, I think it is quite interesting. And next year in Geneva in 2026, there are going to be the SDT Congress. So it's always super interesting to get there because you see all the ramifications of the theory in numerous domains. So I think for the theory is to apply it in social policies, in the training programs and whatnot. And personally, it's going to be close to 20 years that I'm a prof. And one thing that fascinates me doing research is to help my PhD students progress in their own fields of interests, which gravitates around SDT. For example, Samuel, he's working on job crafting, how employees can be proactively engaged in changing their tasks so that it is more need satisfying. Coralie is interested in workplace incivility or workplace harassment. How can it has an effect on autonomy, belongingness, and competence? Frustration. Florence, we published a paper linking the 3 basic psychological needs with cardiac electrophysiology. So measured by a chest straps. So we are linking what the head is thinking and how the body feels. And finally, with Jessica, we are measuring the different types of motivation to pay income tax and to see what are the antecedents and consequences of the autonomous and controlled reasons to pay income tax. And further along, I'd like to work on unconditional universal basic income because I think it's the only way to go. So those are the 2 general streams of things I see, both for SDT and for the research that I and we are doing as a lab.
That's so interesting. I like the human mind, and it's interesting because it's universal. Like we're way more alike as humans as we are different, and I think it's important to remind that to people. We're way more alike than we're different, and understanding those needs is part of it. So more books and articles to read in the future.
Yeah,
that's great. That's great. So the last word is yours. What would you like to say to our audience?
I'd like people to remember only the ABC: autonomy, belongingness, and competence. If you target those three basic psychological needs, not only is it better for you, but it is better for people around of you, be it at the individual, organization, or societal level. These are the essential nutrients for both performance and well-being, both in the short and longer term. So if you can personally and organizationally and societally act to increase both satisfaction and decrease in satisfaction and thwarting or frustration, we will win together.
I love those words. That's music to my ears. Well, thank you very much, Jacques, for your time and expertise, allowing us to learn stress-free about self-determination and motivation. To my audience, thank you for listening. I love you all, and see you soon.
Thank you so much for listening to our whole episode. I hope you learned a lot and had as much fun as we did. If you want notifications for new episodes, you can subscribe to my channel on YouTube or on your favorite podcast streaming platform. You can also like, comment, share with your friends and family on top of subscribing. It's a great way to support the podcast free of charge, allowing me to bring you even more subjects to learn stress-free about. You may also join my Patreon and follow me on social medias to get news and teasers for upcoming episodes. All relevant links are in the description below. I'm curious, what have you learned in this episode, or what surprised you? Leave us a comment and let's keep the conversation going. To conclude, a huge thank you to you, the listeners, and to our guests. You all make that podcast possible. See you soon for another episode of Learn Stress Free. Until then, keep learning. I'm your host, Jacques Forest, signing out, wishing you the best. I love you all.